everyone. So, welcome to Numbers Therapy Ep.5. Today's discussion and topic is Poise, emotional detachment, and data-driven analysis. And while the market may not be on a winning streak lately, at least we are here with Numbers Therapy in terms of providing value and hitting Ep.5. So, if they're coming on here, as you know, that means that they know something, and so we're here to get it out of them and watch. So the purpose, of course, of Numbers Therapy, always to reiterate, is to talk through macro stuff and bring on and showcase our experts in here. The goals specifically, to make sure everyone understands how all the things fit together. Can I just do a quick mic check? Everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Jake, you hear me okay?
Yep, I got you.
So make sure everyone can understand how all of the big things fit together, make better decisions with NFTs and other investments using a balanced perspective, which we'll touch on today. Learn about or from some of our people in here and get different perspectives, and then learn about some different areas and opportunities that exist out there as well. It's also, it's the reminder I give every single time. Everybody is at a different stage here, right? From advanced to more intro, and that's a good thing, of course. But as a result of that, it's very important to ensure that everybody's along for the full ride in every episode. So again, guys, if you have any questions, even if they're elementary questions or you're embarrassed, don't be embarrassed, please. Please drop the questions into the guest questions thread here, and I'll make sure that they're woven in so that you're along for the full ride. And if it's a wider question or a more advanced one, we'll bring it in at the appropriate time as well. And then lastly, just this important note and disclaimer, none of what you hear and here is financial advice. It's all opinions. So without further ado, today we have our main dude on, Jake, aka Jakeandbake, aka the lead of MVHQ. As I'm sure you've seen, he's of course quite well versed in the space in general and an excellent trader. But what I've personally paid attention to a bit more and very much appreciate about him is his objectivity and poise, especially in times of crisis or challenging circumstances. So more specifically, the challenge for many of us, including myself, is emotional attachment at times. And we've seen it recently with Azuki, and we've seen it in general lately with the wider macro markets and NFT volume. And I just think he's the perfect person to discuss this with. So without further ado, let's welcome Jake on. Hello, Jake.
Hey, thank you. That was a very nice introduction there. Appreciate it, Aslo.
It only took me 2 hours to write. So first off, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about your background. Of course, everyone knows you from in here, but talk about your background maybe in general, or pre NFTs, or what got you into NFTs, whatever you feel comfortable with, to maybe give a little bit of extra color to people.
Yeah, for sure. Before I came on, full time to this wonderful NFT space that we have here, I was in finance for a while. I graduated with a business management degree, so it's kind of just like a general business degree. And I worked at a credit union for a while. I was a loan officer and also a financial analyst, doing a lot of projections on the credit union's financials, working with the balance sheet, income statement, just projecting all the line items, doing reports for the executives, and all that stuff. It was a good time, but decided to move over to investment services type stuff. I worked for an investment company as well, doing financial reporting, putting together retirement analysis for financial advisors. They'd hire us out to do that for them. And I was doing that until COVID, and then COVID happened, and working from home a bunch. We were pretty slow, and I wanted to dive into other stuff. I dove into betting a lot in daily fantasy sports because there wasn't shit going on during COVID, and the NBA bubble came back and everything, so that was fun. And through daily fantasy sports, I found out about Top Shot actually, from a guy named Jonathan Bales, which is actually how a lot of early NFT people found out. and got into the game is Jonathan Bales wrote this article about why I bought this $35,000 John Morant moment or NFT or whatever. And I thought it sounded pretty cool. And Jonathan Bales, I knew was a pretty smart guy, so I was like, all right, I'll jump in. And I started with Top Shot, and since then, I kind of got hooked like right away. I understood, after just like a couple days, I kind of understood. Oh, this is gonna be big. Like people are gonna love this new technology. And so I just dove in and got into and during the Top Shot days, it was like everyone was in the Top Shot Discord, which is funny to think about now. Like trying to hang out in the Top Shot Discord sounds like a nightmare. But early days in the Top Shot, because there wasn't a ton of people around, it was actually pretty nice. There was like a market chat channel. I remember Ryan H. Was a big voice in the marketplace channel on Top Shot. Yeah, early days Top Shot. I know it's wild. Um, but in there, we found a group, a Discord actually. I know a lot of people don't like Cole, but Cole, this was before Cole had any type of following at all. He invited me, as well as a lot of other people into like a private Discord because the Top Shot was growing a bunch and it was kind of getting a little bit to be too much to just hang out into the Top Shot Discord. So we had a private Discord, and that was Top Shot Investors Club, and that uh eventually became Metaverse HQ. So it's been
That's what the TSIC is that everybody sees, in our chat as well. The TSIC sometimes, Top Shot Investors Crew, right?
yeah. If people have a orange name, I think Ryan H has one, G6 has one, NFT Ranch. They're all the very early days of our group back before we even covered all NFTs. It was only Top Shot stuff.
That's too funny, man. I mean, a couple of things that sound like they're so distant at this point, right? Like the bubble, the NBA bubble. Like I didn't even think about it until until you just said that. But then also, the Top Shot Discord. At least when I was in there, which was reasonably early, also it was positive. Like it was exciting with a positive sentiment to it, and people were asking when PAX, and the chat was going nuts and all that good stuff. And you were probably in there a bit before me. But I remember when that sentiment was positive. So, all right, so that's excellent background. Thanks for sharing all that, and hopefully everyone got to know a little bit more about you as a result too. So with Top Shot as like the background, right? Like you transitioning from like Top Shot over to ETH-based NFTs, right? Which we all know kind of what that timing was. What did Top Shot do for you that helped provide your frame for ETH-based NFTs? Like what lessons did you learn there? How did you come in as a result of it? Like what was that process like for you?
Yeah, it definitely helped me in a couple areas. One was like understanding the supply and demand of the market. Um, just seeing like early Top Shot days, how much it blew up, because they had a relatively little supply based on, it really caught fire in like February or so of 2021. And just seeing how the run up from when the market has like the most attention, when people in real life start asking you about 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 Top Shot or about NFTs, like just seeing that and be like, oh, like this is an understanding, like, oh, this is probably a top signal if my friends are asking me about this right now. But of course, I didn't know as much at the time about that. Um, but like early Top Shot days in February, I had buddies come up to me like asking about Top Shot. They didn't even know I was in NFTs. And they like showed me this Top Shot thing, and at the time I should have seen it as the top signal, being that that when retail comes into the market like that, they probably already heard about it from the friends who were the early adopters, who heard from their friends who were the innovators, the first product people. So when retail comes in, a lot of times it signals a top, or at least a local top,
Yeah, that's
of something. So that was a big lesson that I learned from Top Shot.
yeah.
Uh, and I wish I would have taken more advantage of in like January or February of this year, when I had old coworkers hit me up for NFT advice, and people I never talked to in high school hit me up wanting to talk about NFTs. I should have applied it a little bit more in terms of converting converting
Yeah,
my portfolio to stables at the time. But that was definitely one of the biggest lessons.
that's a good one. I mean, that's a good lens to use as a proxy, right? It doesn't even have to be like that quantitative, right? It's just a simple signal that you use to get a pulse on like when the market's topping to some extent. Maybe before we move fully into ETH NFTs and the state of the how you're thinking about the market and how you view NFTs in general, maybe we'll just hit Scotko's question real fast that he was curious about, which is you talked about you know market tops, but then also like the supply because you were learning about supply and demand. So like what lessons did you learn from Top Shot initially that then helped frame maybe as it related to like supply and demand, or what did they just mismanage in your opinion that you then used to help frame other projects? Like how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, there's definitely several things that they messed up. The supply is the biggest one, I would say. They prepared, and honestly, it's they said this, so it's honestly on the investors as well. But they basically, their whole goal was to, you know be a product for the masses. So they released supply as if they were already a product for the masses. And really, it was just people. It was really just their huge growth came from speculation. And then once prices go down, that all those users, or a vast majority of those users, left the product, and then now they have all this supply, and they don't have the users to back up needing this supply. But that's the biggest thing, is prepare. They basically release supply as if they were going to acquire these users, but then they didn't. So I guess understanding, really, just the lack of understanding, basically, of where what their trajectory in terms of their business growth was, and they just not really preparing well for it.
I mean, it's been like a pretty useful lesson, right? That's been applicable to all of the projects that we analyze too, right? Whether they should come in with a 10K supply or a 5K supply or even a 1K supply, that it seems like it's been a very relevant lesson actually.
Yeah,
For
exactly. That's definitely something I pay a lot of attention to when a new project drops. Is what's the supply? How is this gonna basically the dynamic between the supply, the price of whatever it is, and then also the demand coming in, and if it makes sense. That's just one. The supply is obviously one of the factors, but it's also a big factor that I think a lot of people overlook, is if it makes sense. If the demand's going to be there for that supply in the long run, or if
Yeah,
the supply is way too little for what the demand is that we're seeing, then maybe it turns out to be a great buy, because it's cheaper, and there's going to be a lot more people that are going to be wanting to pick it up on secondary that missed out on the original mint.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So okay, so let's maybe talk NFTs in general, right? Like, obviously we're all biased. We all like NFTs. We find them innovative, exciting, good opportunities at times, like all those good things. But I'm curious, how do you think of NFTs as it relates to your portfolio? Like, and what's your view and recap on NFTs over the last year, where they are today? Like, what are you thinking? I'm curious.
Yeah. NFTs are definitely a large part of my portfolio. It's not something I would recommend other people to have a large part of their portfolio, but because I feel as if um, I have an edge in this market compared to others. A lot of people in Metaverse HQ would definitely have an edge as well on the market, because it's pretty inefficient. But in general, like, I don't think this is like you should have like 50% of your portfolio in NFTs as an asset class, especially if you don't understand the market, but because I feel like I have the expertise in that area, I feel like I can outperform in NFTs as my portfolio than others can. So I allocate a larger percentage of my portfolio towards that. Um, but honestly, it's probably still too much of mine. Um, Especially, I would say right now, my overview look and kind of how I've always looked at NFTs is I thought it was going to be, this thing that blows up, but similar to the the internet bubble. It's going to pop. I've always thought. I mean, I've been saying it in the last few months. Like, I think prices are way too high. They're inflated for what they are. I still think I mean, they're still pretty high in terms of like buying these JPEGs for tens of thousands of dollars. Um, I still think NFTs are going to be, um, you know, a technological revolution that's gonna change many different facets of our life. But I think it's gonna take years to really fully implement. And right now we're in the speculation period that's obviously fallen quite a bit from the peak. And I don't know if it's gonna recover anytime soon. But I do think it is gonna recover. Not obviously not in a lot of projects, but just in general in terms of the NFT market. And what I look for a lot with NFTs is I look for projects that are using them in new ways. Basically, projects that are really trying to take advantage of what the technology allows. Um, like for instance, I like to point out, even though this was a failed drop, but the Budweiser, uh, they did like a collab with these like independent podcasts, and they released an NFT. I know a lot of you guys did this. It was like $500. It actually turned out to be a flop. It's like only like 0.01 a lot for a lot of these, but they released this NFT with these independent podcasters, and if you buy it, you get a percentage of their podcast revenue, which I think is pretty cool. A pretty cool model. I don't know exactly the laws around if that's considered a security or not, probably. But I do think like utilizing that kind of technology to be able to give independent creators, podcasters, artists as well, giving them a way to raise money outside of just the uh, traditional way of like having to sign with a label. They can just sell NFTs and give people a percentage of their royalties. I just like things like that where you really utilize what NFTs allow, what the NFT technology allows. Those are projects that I like to look for. The ticket is another one that I'm a pretty big fan of, where they just group by they use their connections. They group by a huge package of premium tickets, courtside box seat tickets at these huge venues. I'm assumingly get probably a very good deal as you than you would get on Ticketmaster, and then they sell these NFTs that give you lifetime access to it. Yeah, it's those are the kind of projects that I think will succeed going through this bear is the projects that uh, are innovating on top of the technology, and I think there's a lot of ways that NFTs can be used that we honestly still have not seen, and those are the ones that I look for and try to get in early on. And a lot of them are going to be failures. A lot of them, even if they are a good idea, the execution's poor. But I think there's some unicorns that are going to pop up and be built during this bear market that can really take off in the long term.
I'm happy that at least you said ticket, because had you only said Budweiser, I can already hear like AI and other people like typing in chat and saying that like you were paid placement here, talking about Budweiser, which is the bullshit that I talk about. So I'm thankful that you said at least something else and helped defend against that. All right, let's talk about a specific project, right? Like a situation that we know happened recently, right? So Azuki, as we all know, was a very and is still a very beloved NFT project. And you made a pretty big bet there originally, I believe. Is that right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So if you can remember, like, can you talk us through originally, at least, like, what was the original asymmetry that you saw with Azuki? Like, how were you thinking about it? What do you think was unique? What was your angle that existed? Like, yeah, how are you thinking about it in general?
Yeah, I think the first thing that stood out to me was the art for sure. It's like by far my favorite profile pic art of any NFT project already, and that's um, people talk about utility, but I mean that in itself is one of the biggest utilities uh, in the space is being able to have a dope profile picture that you can flex online, like as your identity. Similar to how you flex a Rolex or a fancy car in real life. This is like your way of flexing in the metaverse and having a fake profile picture is one of the biggest requirements, and that's what I really liked about Azuki is how clean the art was, and it actually like it was like cool too. Whereas apes, a lot of people online would make fun of apes, obviously. Who the normies who trash NFTs, they love to go out after the monkey JPEGs, whereas if it's like a person that like looks like you, then that's more relatable for the average person. So I saw that as something that could easily onboard more people that that thought a monkey picture was a little lame, or having some type of animal avatar was lame. I think it was more like widely accessible to a general audience, and then alongside just the art was the execution. I loved their site. I loved how they incorporated like these lo-fi, kind of beats into their website. I loved their mind map and everything that it showed. I love how they put community first, how they wanted to be. The tagline of the skaters of the internet. They wanted to be like the cool brand. Their merch was sweet. The fact that their dev team had invented this year 721 standard to save gas for people. Um, the fact that they already had spaces with Coinbase, including Coinbase's main account, that had like 4 or 5 million followers or whatever on it. Like literally the day after they launched, they already had this huge spaces set up with Coinbase, so it was clear that the team had connections as well. Um, and I just thought like everything they did well. Like it was everything they did, even like the traits on the Azukis. I thought were so it was like clear that they were well thought of, like the way that they distributed the traits. In terms of like what ones were rare, like the coolest looking ones were rare, and they were rare in like the right amounts. So it allowed them the maximum amount of gamification in terms of like sniping and wanting the cool ones, and it was really just like on almost every level. I was impressed by what they were doing, and it was something where I couldn't really find many cracks, which is funny to say now, obviously in hindsight. Um, but at the time, like there really wasn't any huge or even like small things that I was like upset with them about. And I mean, in like every other project before that, there was at least one thing that I can point out like pretty quickly that I was like, oh, I don't like that they're doing this. But there wasn't really anything like that with Azuki, and that was just like, all right, I need to go for it. That's how you can win big in these type of markets, is making a big conviction bet, and so I did. Um, and it still paid off, but not as much as what it was a month ago or so.
That's awesome. Yeah. So it's a lot of components. It sounds like, right? It was a composition of a whole bunch of things, and if we, like Azuki originally, right? It was from what I recall, at least like 1/8 mint, and then pretty rapidly ascended. It was probably the first one to like pretty rapidly ascend, right? 3, 5, 7, 10, like pretty rapidly, right? Eventually, even up to 15, pretty closely, pretty shortly after, I believe, right? Um, but then we
Yep.
kind of hit this period afterwards, right? That we sat a little bit, right? Like there was a little bit of a gap in between, I think, the original release and then, when the party happened and then the beans and all those things. What was your sentiment during that time, right? Because there was totally an opportunity for you at that point to be able to trade out, right? Know that we were kind of at like a temporary, I don't know, plateau, plus or minus, ranging area, plus or minus, right? And trade out into other things. Like that was totally an opportunity too. So we had this pause. Like, how were you feeling at that point? Did that feel like business as usual? Were you okay with the timing? Like, what was your sentiment at that point?
Yeah, at that point, I was very happy. I mean, because the beans were mooning. I mean, the beans were going for more than what I had bought my Azukis for. So I was like, and I got two of them. So I was pretty ecstatic at that point. I honestly, it was always in my mind that I was like, I'm gonna hold this for the long haul. Like this is getting in on Bored Apes early right here, and I saw it was also like you were watching, all these airdrops and this value being given to the apes over time. I was like, all right, well, Azuki's they just deliver the beans. Like this is the what's gonna happen. Like this, they're gonna be the next Bored Apes. Like they understand how this market works. They understand like how this NFT building a brand works. So I'm just going to hold them. So I really didn't sell. Obviously, it wasn't a good decision in hindsight. I think I sold like 6 or 8 beans or whatever at the time just to get some profits back. Um, but no, honestly I was just looking to hold at that point because I believed so much. It was my strongest conviction play
Yeah,
out of any project. Uh,
yeah, that's cool. That makes sense. And like, I mean, it sounds like even leading into pre beans and pre LA party, it took a few weeks, but you were fine with that time horizon, right? Like there was discussion in the Discord. You kind of saw that things were coming. There was some teasing of events. Like it sounded like you were comfortable, even though of course like 3 weeks or whatever it was is a lifetime in NFT land. Like you were comfortable with that time horizon. You were therefore happy with the party and the beans and all that. Like it sounds like you were happy until that point, right? And everything was felt like it was on track. Is I guess what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew it's not gonna, they're not gonna release a collection reveal and then drop another collection the next day, right? It takes time to build out
Yeah.
these things, and I was very happy with how everything was going. I didn't have any complaints. I was sitting comfy.
Okay, that makes sense. So, all right. So, fast forward, right? And we've all been in chat. Like, we're all like loosely familiar with it. But I think I want to get a bit more color on your perspective and your experience with it and how you thought about it, of course. But recently, of course, is when things became a little bit more interesting. We'll say, right? And that plus, of course, like the market in general started to go in a bit more of a not as nice direction as it relates to the macro markets. More importantly, but then that whole this whole situation with Zaga came out, and what happened with his other projects and rugs and kind of the lack of remorse and tactfulness and probably some other descriptors or adjectives or elements that I'm missing as well. But I remember that the main day or two that was happening, you came on and I think it was the day after you said I took a 24-hour pause. Uh, what was your reaction to all that happening? How did you come up with the approach for you, which was I'm going to take this 24-hour pause because I'm just not maybe seeing clearly, or like talk us through that timeline for you, of how you were experiencing that, how you went about your next steps. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think normally I'm able to stay stay pretty composed when like shit hits the fan. Um, but like it was kind of just like a double whammy for me. It was like I was already too over leveled over leverage into NFTs with after the other side or the other side drop. Um, happening, because I kind of went. I mean, I went pretty hard uh, on lands at that time, and then the market took a pretty big hit at that time. Um, so I was already like feeling hurt. I was already down, but I was like, all right, we're gonna figure this out. We'll be all right. And then, I mean, I come back. I wasn't at my computer at the time that the news happened. I come back like 2 hours after it dropped and see everything on Twitter like blowing up about it. And I was just like, "Oh my god, are you kidding me? Like after this market drop, now you got to hit me with this. This is like my biggest bag by far." So it just like hurt. It was like a gut punch at the time. Like I felt like I was being kicked while I was down. Um, and I mean, audibly, I was like, I would yell, like, "Fuck, fuck, fuck," in my apartment because I was just so pissed. I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this is happening right now!" Like out of nowhere too. Like no, I don't think anyone expected like this to just come out of nowhere. With this news. So yeah, I felt pretty blindsided. So I just knew like, all right, I need to take it some time. I need to like really like collect the facts of everything too before I make any moves. Like it didn't look good initially, and I was just like not in a good headspace after being kicked while I was down. So I knew that I knew that too, and I knew that I probably shouldn't make any trades uh, while I was in this emotional spot. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna sleep on it, and then I can level head assess things in the morning, um, and that's what I did.
I mean, it sounds really simple what you're saying right now, right? Like in hindsight, of course, but in reality, what was happening at the time was not only were you or whoever else were pretty knee deep in Azuki's, you know, were having this tough reaction, but also at the same point, like there was a sell off happening, right? Like there was immediate action, of course, in response to what this the spaces was like and the follow up commentary. Like there was action. So like as simple as it sounds, what you're saying, you know, I'm sure it would have been just as easy to look at the markets and be like, "Holy shit! Like this is moving down fast. Like, should I just sell some off at this point?" Yes, I'd like to take some time to pause and take a breath, but also I don't want to wait until if it does, it didn't, but if it does go to like to one or zero, right, and be stuck at the absolute bottom at that point with a completely, you know, uh, much lower valued asset at that point. So like that's a really tricky balance, I feel like, right? And I guess in your mind, you were thinking, I'll give myself a little bit of time, knowing that this is certainly dipping right now, but it doesn't seem like it's maybe that great. And was that kind of the thought process in your mind, or are you just, what were you thinking exactly?
Yeah. Honestly, like that's not what I did. It's not very normal for me. Usually I'm able to kind of separate the emotions, and be able to make trading decisions quickly, in the heat of the moment. But at that time I was just like pretty hit by it. And also, like it just felt like a lot of things were up in the air in terms of like if this was like really that at the time. Like it seemed like more research was needed, so I didn't really want to sell off. What was for a while, like my biggest conviction play. Like I felt so good about this project, and all of a sudden, it's like to be able to like completely detach, be like, all right, I just need to sell everything. Um, in less than an hour of hearing this news. So yeah, it was I don't know. I lost my train of thought there.
Well, it's okay. I mean, it was. I mean, it was wild, of course, for everybody in here because we had people in our group who were all trading on different levels of time horizons and information and right. So, like some people, you were certainly in the camp in this case, maybe because it was a bigger bag, maybe it was because you had to catch up, it was unclear, whatever it was. where you wanted to take the 24 hours to be able to gather all information and make a decision, right? Of course, we also had people in here who were trading, and we're a pretty smart group, right? Like almost as smart as it gets in the trading space, I would say, NFT trading space at least. And yet we had people in here, I think, going in both directions, to be honest with you, right? Like some people were like, sell, sell, sell. I need to get rid of this thing, at 8
Yeah.
because I think it's going to go further. And some people were like, holy shit, generational, generational wealth opportunity. I need to scoop at 7. Like everyone's going in different directions, to be honest with you. So really unusual times. It's not common, especially with some version of groupthink. It's uncommon that we'll have people going in such different directions within our group. It's I don't know. I found it to be very unusual, to be honest.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
pretty wild. And at the time too, I was thinking, I would say, because there was these varying opinions, like, I mean, there was a lot of people that were like me, in terms of like they loved Izuki, and it was their big conviction bet as well. And not even just in this group, but on Twitter too, I'd see a lot of people, kind of like wanting to get the facts before making a harsh decision. Like wanting to, I guess, hear an AMA from Zagabond before wanting to dump it, their Izukis as well. So, and I mean, they still have executed well up to that point. So there still was that, and so I knew, it wasn't going to be, and the art's still there, the art, and the artist wasn't involved in any of that as well. So there still was support enough to where I knew it wasn't just going to completely crash to zero. And by the time I'd found out about the news, it already had dumped quite a bit. So also within my thought process was, all right, it's not gonna like crazy dump from here. It's not like I need to sell right away. Like it already has dumped quite a bit. So making a rash decision to dump mine now, I don't think makes a ton of sense. I think it makes more sense since the market has already dumped, to wait on it, and get more information. I think if you heard this right away and you saw this, um, if at the time I had saw this, like right when it dropped, instead of hours afterwards, and assessed it enough to be like, all right, this is not good. Like the market's not going to handle this well. Then maybe I would have sold a couple of my Azukis into that, while the price was still high. But being late to it and seeing it already have dumped quite a bit, and understanding that there was likely some support, from uh, Azuki supporters, that would keep the price from falling too much, then I knew, I had a little bit of time to, step back and assess and get my emotions in check, to be able to make a clear decision on this.
yeah, that makes sense. So okay, so you did that, right? You took the step back, and maybe the 2 hour delay was even fortuitous in this case, right? That kind of forced you to do that, maybe. But so you took the step back, you assessed it, and took a breath for 24 hours. After you kind of did that assessment, and you had we had the additional spaces or multiple spaces. I think it might have even been right. How did your investment thesis shift as it related to Azuki? Where did you start, and where did you land afterwards?
Yeah, it's something. Honestly, it's something that's still ongoing for me. But it's definitely took quite a big hit, I would say, uh, in terms of my trust in the team. I sold off half of my Azuki portfolio, since the news, and I'll probably sell off a little bit more as well. But I will say I'm still gonna hold. It's still my favorite. It's still my favorite art. Like I don't like. I think the art, as far as profile pictures, is something that's is pretty underrated. Even though it gets talked a lot, I still think it's like an underrated aspect of a project, especially if the art's like top tier. Um, so I still think there's also I still see a lot of support, uh, from Azuki, owners on like Twitter. Like I still see a ton of people rocking Azuki profile pictures. There's there's people staying around. It's not like everyone's jumping ship afterwards. So I still think there is a community there that's ready to rebuild from the ashes, I guess, if you call it that. But long term, I definitely don't want to have as much of my portfolio allocated towards it after seeing what they've done at Zagabond being uh, not really to be trusted uh, from here. But also, I also see that they have the connections, and they've executed. Like even though he has done not so great things in the space, I still think that they have a chance to execute um, and make the number go up. So, so I'm still holding on to at least some portion of my portfolio for the longer term.
If I just build on top of that, Jake, and like we did some like football field analysis here for half a second, right? It sounds like what kind of you were thinking before was, pre whatever you want to call this, right? Pre all this garbage, right? All this Agripon garbage that happened, the not good news. You were kind of thinking, okay, we already creeped up to 5, 10, 15, 20. So therefore, like the floor seems pretty protected at this point as it's starting to cement itself as one of the more solid projects out there. But there's still like the existing upside that exists, right? Where it can become the next Bored Apes or whatever it was. And that it sounds like that's what you were thinking originally. Versus afterwards, it sounds like it's not that the top has necessarily changed a whole bunch because they still have the same connections. It's still this iconic art, but maybe the risk and therefore like the bottom dropped a little bit, right? Where there's now these new levels of risk where maybe there are these outcomes where it does become the next Bored Apes and it's iconic and all those good things, but there's also now these outcomes introduced where Zagabond just decides to leave the project or not likely of course but like some variant within there and therefore like the risk was exposed at this point. Is that a reasonable summary?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it. I still think like the top end is there. Like if a brand is big enough, like people don't really give a shit about their founder. I mean, Zuckerberg is like pretty hated, I would say, but for the most part. But fucking Facebook and Instagram is huge, and if you were early investor in that, then you made a ton of money, right? I mean, Walt, like Disney's a huge brand. Walt Disney's, I think, pretty known for being a not a good dude when he was alive. So, I think if a brand can get big enough, it separates uh, the average consumer of whatever that brand is. I think they don't really think about the founder as much as they think about the potential of the brand itself. So that's kind of my thought process on Azuki is that like I think there's potential still there of that brand blowing up, but the risk, like you said, and put very well, is a lot higher now than what it was before. So I want to trim off more of my portfolio to reduce the risk there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have one more question for you before I do that. For anybody who's on and listening, now would be a good time if you have any questions. I mean, look, Jake is covering every angle and fully pulling back the curtain on his thought process and everything, so there may not be many questions left. But if you do have questions, now would be a great time to drop them into the guest questions thread, and I'll make sure to weave them in afterwards. But so the one other question I have, Jake, is with Azuki and just in general with what's happening now in the NFT markets, and what are your thoughts now? Like, what is your approach and your plan as it relates to NFTs? How are you thinking about it? And I say this from the lens of, certainly with the Zuki or, even Bored Apes or whatever, like we've seen this theme of like, you know, maybe there's a bit more risk than, in some of these projects that exist that we have to account for, right? But then even, of course, more widely than that, we have like the macro market things that are certainly going on and that we're all talking about and discussing, of course. Just how are you thinking about the markets in general? How are you thinking about your investment approach? What are your general thoughts there at this point?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of the macro market, like I'm pretty worried overall, and I think NFTs will take a hit, obviously, if we continue to go down. Um, so right now, Honestly, I'm trying to sell quite a bit of my portfolio, my NFTs, convert a lot of it to cash. Um, Hindsight, I should have done it earlier for a lot of things, but we gotta keep our eyes forward and see what we can do now. There's no use, you know, thinking about what could have been. We can only really learn from our mistakes and then move forward. So right now, honestly, like if there's a pump, I'll probably try to sell into it, convert to either ETH or cash. And I'm chilling. Like I'm not really minting much. I'm being extremely picky with what I go after. If there are projects out there, um, a lot of my time is really just focused on building Metaverse HQ. I haven't been super plugged into the market just because I think it takes more time and effort right now um, in terms of what the profit upside is for your time and effort. So I've been allocating uh, a lot of that just to Metaverse HQ in general and building this community and over creating things. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's basically I'm not super optimistic. I think there will be another time for NFTs to have their shine. I don't know exactly what that meta will look like. Maybe it is going to be a soul summer. We'll see about that. But but
Nobody wants.
I do think there will
Nobody
be plug
wants. No,
pockets.
nobody wants to waste their one time on a soul summer, whatever it's worth.
Yeah, right. I will say like I do think there will be pockets where NFTs do well, even while the general market isn't doing well. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know if that'll be on ETH. I don't know if that'll be on an L2, or if it'll be a big play to earn game that breaks out. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but I do think there will be pockets of action within the NFT space, despite the overall economy, turning going into like a prolonged bear, which is kind of what I am expecting at the moment. It doesn't seem to be looking too great. Um, so kind of just watching, waiting, picking spots, being not over trading, um, but kind of just waiting for opportunity
Yeah,
and striking when it's there.
that makes sense. It sounds like you're not quite there yet, but AI's question is, what is in current times, right, with where kind of the macro markets are right now. What's your ideal portfolio, construct in terms of NFTs versus crypto versus stables? And I guess it's crypto also, but stables or cash, whatever. What would your ideal construct look like for that? Even though it sounds like you're still migrating to that in the background.
Yeah, right. I'd say it also like the construction of it probably depends on what the market is too. Like if it's been a bear for a while, then I would want to be more into risk assets, more into crypto, more into NFTs of my portfolio, because the worst of is gone and we're starting to show some strength. But if it like right now, for example, I want to be like probably at least 50% stables, and that's coming from someone who's very has a very high tolerance for risk. Um, Conservative people probably want to be even more than that. Not financial advice. Um, I'd probably say like 50% stables. I don't know, 30% ETH, 20% NFTs. And again, that would be like my right now uh, portfolio size. And those NFTs would be something for the most part that I'd be churning a lot, buying and selling, trading.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um, So the other question Scott goes asking, so right now, of course, we're seeing 30, 35, 40 million a day in OS volume, right? And we know what the macro markets look like as well. So I think two questions, right? One is, do you think there's a chance we see a prolonged downturn like in 2018 crypto? And then, the other, I guess, semi-related question is, how many of the projects that we're seeing now do you think will survive ultimately? What's your perspective there? And man, those are not easy questions, by the way, for you to answer. So we'll treat it as a data point and opinion, a really good data point, but a data point and opinion nonetheless.
Yeah. Um, I think we do get a decent bear for NFTs. We haven't really had one yet. Um, oh, we wanted it for crypto too. For crypto, honestly, I think we get a bear that's longer than the NFT bear would last, because I think if crypto has the periods where, and we've seen this in the past, where it kind of levels off for a while, it ranges for a bit, then NFTs start to pick back up because people are okay. Like, gas prices are usually lower because there's less volatility in the market. So it's cheaper to buy and sell NFTs. People feel okay about where ETH is at. They don't think it's gonna spike a ton or drop a ton, so they're okay deploying it towards NFTs as well. So I think there'll be periods within a longer bear of crypto where NFTs have some shine in them. So I don't think with NFTs being so new, I don't think they'll have as long of a bear as crypto. But I'm also not a big crypto TA guy, so I'm not the best person to ask about a long term like crypto markets. I would say in terms of how many like projects would survive, I'd say very few, very few. Um, I mean, it was. I mean, a lot of these are unsustainable in the beginning. You're giving these anon founders for a lot of times, even if they are regular founders, you're giving them millions of dollars up front, and then asking them to like build something. A lot of times, people are just going to peace out. They're going to suck for rug. They're just going to take the money. It's hard to stay motivated when you already have millions of dollars before you even built whatever your brand is or your product is. And a lot of times it's easier, especially in a bear market, when there's no one in your Discord talking, no one, there's not as many people hyped up about the project. It's a lot easier for these founders to be like, oh, let's just, soft rug, say we couldn't deliver, you know, try at a couple things, but ultimately, take the money and run.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, in general, I mean, even I mean, most vast majority of businesses fail within like the first year or two. In the real world as well. So when you add on the business owners get millions of dollars right up front to play with, and there's not a lot of liability when they can be like anonymous for a lot of times. Like there's not people showing up at their business getting pissed at them. It's just online. They can just shut that off easily, right? Um, so I can see a lot of these people just dipping, and I honestly like a lot of. I think a lot of like a good marker for if a project's going to stay around is if they raise funds, because it means they're a lot of times it means they're serious. I mean, a lot of times they're just doing it because they can, but if they're able to raise funds like from outside investors, I think that's a pretty good sign that they're here and they want to build throughout the bear, and they want ammunition to keep going.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, the other, building on top of what you're saying, right? Like the other consideration that also plugs into what you're saying, right? Is, let's just say that they raise the capital or earn the capital up front, right, for the mint out. I mean, during a bear, there's just not a lot of trading volume that exists, right? So, like, from the plain old cash flow standpoint for some of these projects, they're not going to be earning enough to, like, maybe give a shit in some cases, or at least fund interesting activities or fund development or fund, anything at the end of the day, right? So I think that might be an additional lens to look on look at it too. If they're getting 2, 3, 5 million up front, and with trading volume, they're only getting $100,000 in a year in a bear market. I mean, it's not $0, right? But compared to what it was initially, and motivation might seep out the window at that point too.
Yeah, definitely. That's a big thing to keep in mind is like they might just like a lot of these people aren't like super even like business savvy either. So maybe they mismanage their funds that they got initially, and now they're not right. They don't have that same cash flow coming in that they expected, uh, and they just don't have what it takes in terms of resources to keep it going.
Yep. All right, so we got one other question here that Board Robot's asking about, more specifically about the pivot that you made from Top Shot community into a larger NFT community with MBHQ, and then the related question, of course, which I'm sure everyone always wants to get a peek behind if possible, is how do you see our community, making any adjustment, if at all, if there is some kind of prolonged bear? So answer whatever you feel comfortable with, of course, in there. Um, but it's a question that I'm sure plenty of people want to know.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a good question. Understandable. I've always said like we are gonna adapt to where the market goes. We're gonna adapt to where the opportunities are. Um, and we're gonna continue to do that throughout. If there is a prolonged bear, we're gonna continue to do that throughout the bear as well. So, whether it be our content coverage is going to focus on, what's hot, what's the meta. We're going to continue to try and bring alpha on whatever it is in terms of early opportunities that we can get in. Yeah, and I'll give you a perspective from like a business side of things. We really want to expand on our consulting branch of NBHQ, so we can bring in another revenue stream outside of just the keys to keep the business itself. Running smoothly and more stable ground for the long term as well, and be able to feed in opportunities to members in terms of early access to whatever projects we partner with and special discounts on that side of things as well. So looking to kind of insulate the business with multiple revenue streams as well, and then like on the member side of things, just going to where the opportunity is. Like that's always what I want to do is to be able to adapt. I think being Metaverse HQ, like it's a pretty general name. We're not like gaming HQ, we're not like art HQ, or we're everything within Web3. And so being that, it allows us to kind of stay nimble with what we focus on, and we're always going to try and chase whatever and also get ahead of whatever the opportunity is, no matter what the market is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean, yeah, in any way, right? It's probably going to run in unison with what any individual person would do too, right? Like in a trading market where it's active, you trade, right? In a bear market where you build, right? So I imagine it's probably just going to shadow it, and Web3 is not going anywhere, so that's good. So yeah, thanks so much for that context and the peek behind the kimono. So I think we're at the top of the hour here. It seems like we've hit every question at this point. So unless there's any other questions anybody has, and I'm not seeing much, I think we're good to go here. I mean, it was definitely a different conversation than some of the other ones we've had in the past, and really talking through like thought process and poise and all that stuff, and in addition to like the bonus questions we got at the end. So super thankful you came on, and you being candid about what your thought processes were in these cases, because I think that was definitely unique for me, and hopefully for some other people as well. So thanks, Jake. Really appreciate it, man.
For sure, man. I appreciate the invite, and I always try to be open about and transparent about what I think. on any type of thing within the market, or my thought process on trading or investing or anything of that nature. So any members, feel free. You can hit me up anytime if you ever want to pick my brain about something. I'm here.
Good. Thanks everyone for joining, like usual. On to next week. We'll have some exciting guests coming up. And thanks, Brad, by the way, for the call out. And just a reminder, if you guys we have a survey in there in announcements, I believe. So if you have any topics you want to hit, or if you have a specific guest who you think would be excellent to bring on, just drop it in there, right? Like I know by nature, like this has to stay a little bit fluid, right? Because the markets change and all that good stuff. So honestly, any tips, any suggestions, or things you want to learn, or otherwise, I'm sure you're not the only one who's thinking of it. So please make sure to send it through. So thanks, everyone.